One of my first videos ever on the Wilson Audio Labs channel was showing off the first generation Rockford Fosgate amplifiers. Recently I was contacted by this guy named Tall saying, hey, I've got this amp I want to donate, let me have your address. So he sent it over and this is what he sent. Check it out. Punch 45, first generation. This is the MOSFET, the original one from around 1985 to about 1988. This one's unique because the heatsink is actually anodized blue, whereas most of them are, in fact, all of them I've ever seen before are anodized black, which will sometimes turn a little bit gold based on the temperature. Here is a black one. You can see what it's supposed to look like. And here's a comparison of the two. The blue one on the left looks really cool if you ask me. It looks like an old linear power amplifier from around this time frame as well. Now, if we look at some old school Rockford Fosgate history, we will see in 1985, the Punch 45 MOSFET amplifier is born. Now let's pull up the 1986 Audio Magazine Car Stereo Directory for May of 1986 because it did not show up in 1985. So here we have it in the first line, the Punch 45 MOSFET, $200 in 1986, which is equivalent to around $575 in 2024, accounting for inflation. Now, thanks to RF Archives, or Tom from Facebook, he found a whole bunch of these really cool ads showing the Punch 45 amp from back in the late 1980s. Also, my guy Todd Zier down in Texas, he has got tons of old school installs showing off these old Rockford amps. He's been around forever doing installs since the 80s. Here you can see this 8-speaker system with one Punch 45, two 12s, two 6x9s, two 6-inch, and two tweeters. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, Rockford had a display with one amplifier powering 16 speakers. This for sure sold a lot of their amps. Back to the Punch 45 MOSFET. Again, this is Rockford's first Punch 45, the original. Here you can see on one side we have bass control, power LED, and a treble control. The EQ circuit in this is patented by Jim Fosgate back in the day, and Rockford still uses very similar technology even today. On the bottom of the amplifier is very cool. It shows you a whole lot about the amp, including the power output, the wiring, pretty much everything you need to know. Also has the serial number etched in to the bottom of the amp. We also have left and right input gain adjustments. You do have to insert your screwdriver here into the bottom of the amp as shown. And as far as dimensions go, this amp measures 8 inches by 6.2 inches by 1.9 inches. Millimeter equivalents there as well, so it's actually a pretty small amp. Over the last couple decades, I have acquired a lot of Rockford Fosgate literature, including this Punch 45 MOSFET first generation marketing material. Talks about the features and the benefits and the specifications of this particular amp. Very nice to show a 4-hour burn-in, handcrafted in the USA. And as far as ratings go, they measure at 22.5 watts per channel at 4 ohms of 0.05% THD, and at 2 ohms, 35 watts per channel at 0.1% THD. Now this amp is bridgeable as well for 70 watts at 4 ohms. Now one thing I don't like about these, of course, is the wiring comes off using these Molex plugs. I like to use these terminal strips. I'll leave links in the video description if you want to pick one up. Over the years, the Punch 45 is probably Rockford's most popular amplifier. They've had several different generations as shown here, including the original Punch 45, the second generation, the HD or third generation, and then later, around 2005, they came out with the 25 to Life amplifiers. And check out how much bigger this 25 to Life amp is versus the other ones. I have videos of most of these. I'll leave links in the description below. All right, now for the fun part. We're going to put this amplifier on the amp dyno to find out what kind of power it really puts out. If you haven't seen these tests before, on the left, the power output in watts. In the middle, the ohm load. On the right, the voltage of the dyno. We also have a remote clamp so that we can calculate the amplifier's efficiency. All right, so at 4 ohms, it's rated 22.5 watts per channel. Let's try certified 1 kilohertz. And there you go, 36 and 38, right at 14.36. Now let's crank that voltage down, try it closer to 12 volts. Here we go. Certified test again, 4 ohms stereo. And we get 27 and 28 watts at 12.33. Again, we're going up to 1% distortion. They test it to 0.05, so that kind of explains the difference there. Dynamic power at 4 ohms, 14.4 volts, 1 kilohertz, we're at about 38 watts per channel. Next up, we'll reset the dyno here for the 2 ohm run. It's rated 35 watts by 2. Voltage is not specified. Let's try the certified test first up to 1% distortion. And there you go, about 56 watts average per channel at 14.3. But of course, let's back that voltage down to closer to 12 volts because back in the day, a lot of amps were rated at 12 volts. This one did not specify in the manual what these measurements were obtained at. But here we go, right at 40 watts per channel at 12.24 volts. Now we're skipping over the uncertified test again. You'll see why when we show the results. Let's go to the dynamic test here. 1 kilohertz dynamic burst. Looks like channel 2 is a little bit more powerful, 58 and 67 watts at 14.34. Now let's bridge the amp using orange and brown. Orange for positive, brown for negative. Here we go, certified test. 1% distortion, it's rated 70 watts. We get 100 watts at 14.14. But of course, we got to turn down that voltage once again, closer to 12, so we can see this real world back in the late 80s output. Here we go, certified 40 hertz. We get 79 watts at 12.3. Now we are going to show the uncertified test this time, so let's reset the dyno here for the uncertified run at 4 ohms, and voltage is a little bit closer to 14 for this one. Here we go, rated 70 watts. We get 107 right at 14 volts, pulling 17.8 amps. Now let's reset the dyno here and try this dynamic pulse track at 40 hertz, because if you're bridging this amp, back in the day, you're using it to run subwoofers. People running 4 subwoofers off of 100 watts. Yes, a lot of people did it. Now here are the results for this nearly 40-year-old Punch 45 first generation from Rockford Fosgate. There's 8 ohm runs there you can see as well. Pause this if you want to see all the different measurements. Also, the efficiencies were mid-40s to mid-50s and also ran an 8 ohms bridge. So that was a lot of fun. Now let's hook it up to some speakers. First off, just in 2-channel mode with the ELAC bookshelf speakers and see how it sounds.
As the chemicals, they take us higher. The night's young, it has just begun.
Next up, we're going truly old school and going to run it in tri-mode. That's right, stereo and mono simultaneously. Let's talk about how we're going to do that. Here we have the Punch 45 first gen wired up in what's called tri-mode, which gives you the ability to run the amplifier in stereo and mono simultaneously using something like this. This is a choke, which provides low pass, which filters out the high end. And your inputs go on this side, left and right, and then the outputs to the satellite speakers are here. The subwoofer is there. This is designed for 4 ohm, even though these speakers are 6 ohm. I have this wired for 4 ohms. Let's see how it sounds. What do you say? You may have noticed the popping sounds. What that is the mids and highs. When it runs out of power, when the amp runs out of juice, it kind of distorts the mids and highs, which is a problem when you use this tri-mode setup. Let's try a little space age hustle with a tri-mode setup. Here we're hearing some popping again from the mids and highs because the amp is just running out of steam. This is a drawback of using this tri-mode or mixed mono setup. That's why some people like to move towards 2 amplifiers. That way you've got one for your sub bass and one for your mids and highs, not putting all the strain on one 2-channel amp. As expected, running this amplifier hard in tri-mode is going to heat it up. We hit about 114 degrees Fahrenheit here on the heatsink fins. It wasn't unbearable to touch, but it definitely was warm. Now let's take off the bass and treble knobs and take off the 4 screws on the outside of the amp and get inside and see what it's all about. And here we have the baby Punch 45, Rockford's smallest amplifier at the time, back in the late 1980s. You can see here, definitely looks like an 80s amplifier with the transformer there. We do have some 1000 microfarad 25 volt capacitors on the rails, and there you can see all the different components. See the double-sided circuit board. Also here, taking off the transistor clamp, we can see the MT-P3055, the Motorola MOSFET. Also, we'll look a little further down the amplifier and we'll see the D44VH10, which is an NPN, and there's also a D45 VH10, which is a complementary power transistor. Now, if you were really balling back in the day, having a Rockford Fosgate Punch 45 wasn't enough. You had to have you a chrome or gold-plated shroud to cover up your amp and show your friends that you know how to bling. Check out this mint, I mean absolutely mint, perfect interface. Who's that big dummy? Amp shroud for the first generation Punch 45 MOSFET. This is so super slick daddy cool that we still have one of these that looks brand new. Just don't have the fan that goes inside of it and show you how that works. But overall, this was a fun video to make. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you support me at patreon.com/oldschoolstereo. Smash me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment below what you think about this amp. Till next time, Big D, I'm out of here. Of course, the after credit crowd wants to see 2 ohms mono for this almost 40-year-old Rockford Fosgate amp. So we're going to try it. Certified on the dyno, 2 ohms mono, 144 watts at 14 volts. We did use the 1 kilohertz tone. But let's try the dynamic burst and see what we can get. We're closing in on 200 watts. Check it out. 186, 14.11. Make sure you subscribe, comment, like. Big D, I'm out.